Hello, aspiring real estate professionals. Welcome to ACR RES Exam Key Topic Deep Dive Series. Today, we're tackling a topic that might sound a little dry on the surface, but trust me, it's absolutely fundamental, not just for passing your RES exam, but for your whole career ahead. We're talking about gross floor area, or GFA. Our mission today is simple. Take a deep dive into those recent GFA harmonization changes by URA and the other agencies. We'll look at how these calculations actually work now, and importantly, the significant impact they're having on property right here in Singapore. Think of this as your shortcut to really understanding GFA, not just memorizing definitions for the exam. We pulled insights from some great sources, URA circulars, of course. There are also industry analyses from REITAS and ERA, and even some good stuff from 99.co. Now, before June 1st, 2023, GFA was, well, let's just say it was a bit of a mess, wasn't it? Different agencies kind of using different rule books, but now things have been streamlined, harmonized.
And that streamlining, it's a really big deal. You're right. Before, it was honestly a source of massive confusion for pretty much everyone involved. We're talking qualified persons, QPs, the architects and engineers right through to homeowners. Imagine trying to calculate all these different floor areas for URA, SLA, BCA, SCDF, each one with slightly different rules, slightly different definitions. It was complicated. This harmonization is a huge step towards clarity and efficiency, too, across the entire sector.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Before we get into the real nitty-gritty of how GFA is calculated into these new rules, maybe let's quickly understand why. Why was this change so necessary? What was the core problem URA, SLA, BCA, and SCDF were trying to fix?
Well, the problem was essentially a lack of consistency. Simple as that, really. You had different agencies using different floor area measurements for their own specific purposes. So URA's gross floor area, that was mainly about building intensity, how much you could build. SLA used strata area for ownership, what you actually own. BCA had its statistical gross floor area. SCDF used accessible floor area for fire safety. It went on.
Right, different tools for different jobs, but all measuring floor area.
Exactly. And the definitions, how you actually measured these areas, also varied. URA's GFA, for example, typically included the full thickness of the external walls, but it excluded voids. Whereas SLA's strata area, that measured only to the middle of the wall, and sometimes it could actually include voids. You can see how this led to QPs spending, frankly, enormous amounts of time and effort just trying to reconcile these varying calculations for a single project.
Yeah, sounds like a nightmare.
And for homeowners, it could be truly baffling. You could have situations where addition and alteration works, A&A works, actually increased your GFA, but didn't increase your usable strata floor area at all. Think about slabbing over an internal void space. Your GFA goes up, but your strata area might not.
Confusing, right?
Very. So the whole goal of this joint review, working closely with industry reps, by the way, was to harmonize these requirements across the board, make submissions easier, boost productivity, bring some clarity.
Okay, so clarity was key. The changes took effect June 1st, 2023. If you're listening and prepping for your RES exam, what are the absolute must-know takeaways, the sort of pillars of harmonization for the new GFA?
Yeah, good way to put it. There are three main pillars you absolutely need to grasp. First,
Yep.
all agencies, all of them, will now measure floor areas to the middle of the wall. That's the big one, consistency.
Middle of the wall, got it.
Second, all strata areas will be included as GFA. If it's strata area, it counts towards the GFA.
Okay, all strata is GFA.
And third, and this is crucial, all voids will be excluded from strata area.
So no more counting those big empty spaces above living rooms as part of your strata.
Precisely. This effectively closed what some people saw as a bit of a loophole. It brings much greater transparency to the actual livable space buyers are paying for. No more paying for large, practically unusable void spaces or those oversized aircon ledges that weren't really yours in a practical sense. It's a major benefit for home buyers, really.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, here's where it gets really practical for the exam, I think. The devil, as they say, is in the details with these measurements. But maybe instead of just trying to memorize every single edge case, let's try and understand the core principles. How does this middle-of-the-wall idea play out across different parts of a building? What's the fundamental logic?
That's exactly the right approach. The fundamental logic stemming from that first pillar is consistency. Measurement is almost always to the middle of the wall. And importantly, it's the middle of the structural wall. We're talking about the main structure, excluding any, say, decorative finishes on the inside or outside.
Okay. Structural wall.
Yes. So for your typical external walls with finishes, GFA is measured to the middle of that structural wall itself. Similarly, for windows and doors set within those walls, it's measured to the middle of those window or door components.
Okay.
And those striking curtain walls you see on modern buildings? Glass facades. No special treatment there either. GFA is measured right to the middle of the curtain wall system. Same principle. The key really is consistency, establishing a clear structural boundary for the GFA calculation. And the implication for developers, well, it means they really need to firm up their designs, especially these external elements, early on. Avoid any nasty surprises with GFA calculations later down the line.
That makes perfect sense for solid walls or enclosed structures.
Hmm.
But what about things that are more open or stick out, like balconies with just a railing or spaces that don't even have full walls?
Good question. It applies there too, with a slight nuance. For vertical structures like railings or maybe parapet walls at the edge of a floor slab, the GFA is measured to the middle of that outermost vertical structure.
Okay, middle of the railing itself.
Essentially, yes. However, and this is important, if any space beyond that structure is actually designated as strata area, perhaps an extended balcony floor or maybe a private roof terrace, a PRT as we often call it in Singapore,
Right.
then that entire strata area is included as GFA, even the bit past the railing. Ah, I see. So if it's part of your strata ownership, it's GFA.
Exactly, and this applies across different balcony setups. Now, for areas with no external walls at all, maybe like an outdoor refreshment area in ORA that's still covered by a roof, GFA is measured right up to the very edge of that covered area. So the rule is basically, if it's covered and it's part of your unit strata, it counts as GFA.
Okay. Covered and designated as your space equals GFA. That's a clear rule. What about walls that aren't, fully enclosing a GFA space? Or walls shared with non-GFA areas like car parks?
Right, this is where it gets a bit more nuanced, but still logical. If you have a wall next to a non-GFA space, let's say, a wall separating a shop unit, which is GFA, from a common car park, which is typically non-GFA.
Yeah.
The GFA for the shop is measured to the middle of that shared wall, just like any other wall.
Okay.
But if it's a wall between two non-GFA spaces, maybe separating a common car park from an open-to-sky ventilation shaft, then that specific wall can actually be entirely excluded from the GFA computation. Doesn't belong to any GFA space.
Similarly, think about riser shafts for pipes and wires. If they're built right next to an external wall, the inner half of that riser wall, the part facing the non-GFA shaft, can be excluded. But remember, any remaining covered floor areas around it are still GFA. And another common question. Columns along an external wall, do you have to measure around them?
Yeah, good one.
Nope. No need to account for them separately. GFA simply continues to be measured to the middle of the main external wall line, as if the column wasn't there for measurement purposes. Simplifies things.
Okay, that does simplify it. Wow, that's quite a few specific situations. What about something really practical, like connecting walls of different thicknesses? Construction isn't always perfect rectangles, is it?
You're absolutely right, and a harmonization actually accounts for that practical reality. For connecting walls with varying thickness, a 50mm offset is allowed when measuring. This is really a pragmatic measure. It aligns with how the industry typically handles strata area demarcation in those slightly tricky junctions. Makes it a bit more flexible for complex designs. It's a small detail, but important for the QPs doing the drawings.
Good to know they've thought of that.
And speaking of specific property types, it's worth mentioning landed and strata-landed housing. These revised definitions apply right across the board there, too. All proposed strata areas, doesn't matter if they're covered or not, think private enclosed spaces, PES, those private roof terraces, PRT, even private car park lots within the strata boundary, they are now all fully computed as GFA. This ensures consistency with how non-landed developments are treated.
Phew. Okay, there's a lot of middles of walls and specific scenarios to keep in mind. But seriously, I think understanding these underlying principles, middle of the structural wall, covered means included, strata area is GFA, and knowing these key exceptions, that's what will really help you nail this on your RES exam. It's about the why, not just memorizing rules.
Absolutely, you've got it. And it's also important to remember, even with all these GFA definition changes, the requirements for things like net unit internal area and general spatial quality haven't just vanished. For instance, a balcony is still generally capped at 15% of the unit's internal area. And there's still that minimum size requirement, often 35 square meters, for the net unit internal area itself.
Right, those rules still apply.
They do. The difference now is that these measurements are also harmonized, measured to the middle of the walls. And they explicitly exclude things like the AC ledges, those voids we talked about, and other semi-outdoor spaces from that internal area calculation. It makes the internal area figure more representative of true indoor space. And one final point on calculations: communal spaces. Things like public car parks within a development or maybe communal roof gardens or sky terraces. Even if they're technically part of a larger strata lot for ownership, they can still potentially qualify for GFA exemption, provided they meet URA's specific guidelines for shared amenities. It's about encouraging those useful communal facilities.
Right, so shared spaces might get exempted.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we step back from the detailed calculations for a moment, what does all of this really mean for the big picture? Beyond the numbers, how have these changes really transformed the real estate development industry? And crucially, how you as a future agent will need to advise your clients?
Oh, this harmonization is definitely reshaping the landscape, no doubt about it. For developers, the most immediate impact we saw was a reduction in what's called site efficiency. That basically means the proportion of sellable strata area they can get out of the total allowable GFA. One industry analysis we looked at mentioned potentially a less than 10% reduction in efficiency for projects designed under the new rules.
Less sellable space from the same GFA allowance.
Exactly. So naturally, this means developers have had to adjust their land bids downwards. If there's less sellable area to monetize, the land value has to reflect that. We've definitely seen reports of land costs decreasing in various areas, partly because of this effect. There was also a bit of a short-term challenge around new land valuations. During the transition, different interpretations between the chief valuer and developers could sometimes lead to mismatched valuations, added a layer of complexity for a while.
Okay, so significant shifts for the development side. What about home buyers then? Particularly those looking at new launches hitting the market now. How does this impact what they see and maybe more importantly, what they pay?
Yeah, for home buyers, there are a few key effects to be aware of. First, and this might seem counterintuitive initially, you'll likely see higher prices per square foot, but on paper.
Higher? How does that work?
Well, think about those previously excluded areas, the aircon ledges, maybe parts of private terraces, voids that might have been strata but not GFA. Now they are included in the GFA calculation, which often aligns with the strata area. So the advertised PSF for new developments can appear higher. The good news, though, is that the figure you see now more accurately reflects the actual livable or usable space you're comparing.
Okay, so the total price might be similar, but it's divided by a potentially smaller, more accurate usable square footage.
Precisely. Stacked Homes had a good theoretical example. Maybe a three-bedder was advertised before as 1001 SQST at, say, 1598 TSF. Post-harmonization, once you account for the non-livable bits now being measured differently or included, the usable area might be closer to, say, 947 SQSF. If the total price is still around $1.6 million, the advertised PSF now looks higher, maybe $1,690. But it's arguably a more honest reflection of the space you actually live in.
Right, buyers are getting a clearer picture of usable space. That's good for transparency, definitely, even if the PSF number itself might need a bit more context now.
It does, and this leads directly to the second point. You're likely seeing smaller, more efficient designs overall. Developers are now really incentivized to maximize every square foot of functional, livable space. Why waste GFA on things buyers don't value as much?
Makes sense.
So expect new developments generally to feature more compact apartments, fewer larger than necessary void spaces, fewer oversized aircon ledges. It's all about efficiency. And thirdly, you might see a reduced availability of certain premium features, or at least they'll come with a higher price tag. Things like really expansive balconies, large private roof terraces, units with very high ceilings. Because these now fully count towards the GFA, they become more expensive for the developer to include in terms of GFA usage, so they might become rarer or reserved for more premium offerings.
That definitely reshapes what the new launch market looks and feels like. But what about the resale market? Is it feeling these ripple effects too?
Oh, absolutely. The harmonization has had an interesting, perhaps unintended consequence there. It seems to have created an increased demand for certain pre-harmonization properties.
Really? How so?
Well, buyers who are specifically looking for those features that are now less common or more expensive in new build, larger overall unit sizes, maybe those high ceilings, generous outdoor areas like big balconies or PE.
The things that are now GFA heavy.
Exactly. They might increasingly turn their attention to older properties, the ones built under the old GFA rules. These older units might offer layouts or features like those more spacious void areas or larger balconies that weren't fully counted before that just aren't as cost-effective to build today.
So scarcity drives demand.
It seems so. And this increased demand, in turn, could potentially lead to resale price appreciation for these specific types of older, larger properties. Their unique selling points, now rarer in the new market, become a potential premium.
Interesting dynamic. So wrapping this all up, what does this mean for you, our listener, as you prep for your RES exam and think about your future career? What's the key takeaway? It really means looking beyond just the simple PSF number, doesn't it? You need more context now. A seemingly smaller new launch on paper might actually offer you more usable, efficient space, while an older resale unit might present a layout or features that's just not being built anymore, maybe at a price that looks attractive because of how things were measured back then compared to now. Understanding these nuances is absolutely crucial for advising clients properly. Makes you a much more valuable agent. Wow. Okay, what a deep dive into GFA harmonization. We've really covered a lot of ground, from why this unified approach was so desperately needed to the detailed principles of calculation, remember the middle of the wall, and the really profound impacts on development, buying, and even the resale market here in Singapore. Remember those three key changes: measurement to the middle of the wall, all strata areas counting as GFA, and voids being excluded from strata. Really try to nail those down. This knowledge, honestly, it isn't just about ticking a box on your RES exam. It's fundamental. It's about truly understanding property value, understanding what clients are actually buying, and advising them with real confidence. And here's something to think about as you go. As new developments continue to roll out under these harmonized rules, how will our collective perception of spaciousness and value in Singaporean homes evolve even further? Will designers find clever new ways to create those wow factors, those feelings of space and luxury within these new GFA boundaries? Interesting times ahead. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into GFA. Keep studying hard, stay curious, ask questions, and from all of us here, truly, good luck with your upcoming RES exam.